Terms like voter fraud and contested election are very relevant today. We see those in the newspaper all the time, especially within the last few years. But these are not new phenomena. There have been contested elections far back in American history. For instance, one of the most hotly debated presidential elections was that for the 19th President of the United States. President Rutherford B. Hayes won in the 1876 election, marking the 100-year anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Running as a Republican, he did not win the popular vote. By a very small margin, his Democratic opponent beat him for 50.6% of the popular vote. However, the Electoral College would be the deciding factor. Nevertheless, Rutherford received 20 less electoral votes in the original election counting. This was where the controversial part came, because many people felt that those 20 votes were not properly counted or properly assigned. Hence, this hotly contested election. The matter ended up going to the House of Representatives, as was described in the Constitution, and it came so close that when Hayes boarded the train to go to Washington on March 1st, because at that point, March 4th was the day that new presidents were inaugurated, he wasn't even sure whether he would in fact be inaugurated. It wasn't until a compromise was reached that any sort of a conclusion could be found. You see, the different members of the House of Representatives had to decide which way they were going to vote. If they voted along regular party lines, Hayes would become president. But the only way that this could be reached and that the Southerners could be appeased was to reach a compromise regarding the post-Civil War situation. After the war, the situation was known as Reconstruction, and that was the way the country was built up. Naturally, the Southerners didn't have quite as many rights as they did before, because there needed to be some sort of punishment or at least overseeing. After all, one of the main points of the Reconstruction was granting rights of citizenship and voting to former slaves. The Southerners were still not so keen on granting such rights to the former slaves and the newly freed Black Americans. To achieve this final peaceful decision, which would become known as the Compromise of 1877, Hayes agreed to remove all the remaining Union forces from the South, thereby officially ending the Reconstruction era and returning to full peacetime. And mind you, this was over 10 years after the actual end of the Civil War. But it takes a lot longer to build something up again than it does to tear it down. In so doing, he was able to achieve the presidency, but he also received a lot of criticism for this because many of his detractors felt he had bargained or made some kind of a compromise just to win the presidency. As a result, he gained two unflattering nicknames, his fraudulency and Rutherford B. Hayes. Despite this, his presidency was one which couldn't have been much further from fraud. In fact, he was noted for having a very fair, honorable, and dignified time in office.